Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving deep into sunset painting. We got this great tutorial video from artist Dixon. You guys sent it in?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool how he captures like the look, but also the feeling of a sunset.
Yeah, and that's what makes this deep dive so interesting, right? I mean, it's one thing to paint what you see, but Dixon, he goes beyond that. Like he uses color and texture to create this specific mood, the sense of tranquility and warmth.
Yeah, right away he uses this word velvety to describe the sky, which is, it's almost like he wants you to like feel the sunset,
Yeah.
not just see it.
It's brilliant. How he does that is he builds up these layers of color, uses techniques like scumbling and glazing, which are basically applying these thin layers of paint with a dry brush or using like translucent washes, creates a sense of depth and texture. He even says he's kind of, quote, making it up as he goes along.
Yeah, that's what struck me too. Like, he's not afraid to, like, deviate from his initial plan or whatever. In fact, he seems to embrace the challenge, letting the painting evolve organically. Do you think that contributes to the overall mood?
Oh, absolutely. You get that spontaneity, it adds energy, adds vibrancy, almost like the painting is coming alive. It's like watching a sunset unfold, but in real time, with all its little shifts and changes. And speaking of color, his choices are really interesting.
Yeah, he uses, like, the warm reds and oranges and yellows you'd expect, but then he throws in some blues and purples, too. Like, what's he going for with that?
He's playing with color perception and how colors interact. Like if you put a blue next to an orange, they both look more vibrant, creates this visual tension,
Yeah.
adds to that dynamic quality of the sunset.
He also mentions that he's got to be careful not to make the sky too gray. So it seems like he's really deliberate about keeping those colors saturated.
Exactly. That saturation is key to conveying the intensity of the light,
Mm-hmm.
the warmth that you get from a setting sun. If the colors were muted or grayed down, the mood would be totally different.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It wouldn't have that same vibrancy in life,
Yeah.
right? It's like he's like bottled up the golden hour, put it on the canvas. And what about the brush strokes? Like, he doesn't just use brushes. He's using his fingers at one point.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too.
I mean, like, it seems kind of counterintuitive to blend with your fingers when you're trying to create all those details, right?
Right.
What do you make of that technique? Does it contribute to that, like, velvety texture?
I think so. It's almost like he's like feeling his way through the painting, responding to the textures he's already created with the brushes.
Yeah.
And remember, he's all about spontaneity,
Right.
letting the painting guide him.
Yeah, and he doesn't stop at fingers. He's got the palette knife, cotton swabs, all sorts of tools.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not afraid to experiment.
Not at all. And that's what makes watching him so fun. He's breaking the mold, right? It's not just about steps. It's about exploration, discovery.
And that experimental approach, it shows up in the way he does the foreground, too. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't just paint the grass. He creates this sense of depth and texture, almost like you could reach out and touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Builds up those layers.
Yeah.
He uses like a dry brush technique to get that effect of like lots of little things going on in the grasses.
Right.
Just makes the scene so real, alive.
And did you notice how he uses that same grayish green
Mm.
from the sky in the water, like reflecting the colors above,
Yeah.
creates this, like, harmony throughout the whole painting,
Mm-hmm.
tying it all together.
Yeah, it is subtle, but it's important. He's not just painting isolated elements. It's a unified world, a complete experience.
Mm-hmm.
What's remarkable is how he balances that detailed work with like bold, almost jarring choices, like that bright red he uses for the reflection in the water.
Yeah, I know. At first it seems totally out of place, but then,
Mhm.
like,
Then he blends it out, creates a gradient, transitions into the surrounding water.
Right.
It's a risk. But it pays off, adds a touch of vibrancy and energy that wouldn't be there otherwise. Just a reminder that a little contrast, a little unexpected detail, it can really make a painting come alive.
speaking of contrast, he even uses a palette knife to do the texture of the barn roof. Like, makes it rough, almost three-dimensional. It's impressive how he switches between tools so seamlessly.
It's fascinating. Like he's conducting an orchestra, but of tools. And each one is playing its part to create the final masterpiece. And don't forget that trick he uses with the cotton swab,
Yeah.
dipped in spirits to lift off the paint, to create that illusion of distance between the branches.
That was so cool.
It's those subtle touches, those little moments of ingenuity that elevate his work. He's thinking about every detail, every brush stroke, and how it all contributes to the mood, the atmosphere.
Speaking of the trees, I noticed how he uses color to kind of push the barn back in the scene. Creates that sense of depth. How's he doing that?
He uses darker, cooler tones for the trees in front of the barn and warmer, lighter tones for the barn itself. So it's like he's using color temperature to create the illusion of distance.
Right. And then to emphasize that even further, he raises the base of the barn too.
Yeah.
Makes it look like it's nestled back there.
It's all about perspective.
Right.
He's not just painting what he sees, he's playing with our perception of space and depth. And notice how he uses a combination of glazing and stumbling to add those subtle details to the barn and the foliage.
Yeah.
Creates this richness and variation in texture that would be hard to achieve with just one technique.
It's remarkable how much thought goes into every element, even something like a fence in the distance,
Right. And that fence with its broken lines and the varied tones tells us something about the history of this landscape, right? It's not just a pristine scene. It's a place with stories. And it brings us back to Dixon's philosophy of making it up as you go along, right? It's not just about technique. It's about embracing the unexpected, letting the painting kind of take you on a journey.
Like he's giving us permission to break the rules a little,
Yeah.
to experiment, find our own way.
Exactly. He shows us there's no one right way to approach art. No formula for success, right? It's about finding the joy in the process, in the exploration, the happy accidents. That can lead to something beautiful.
So what we're really trying to understand here, it's not just about learning how to paint a sunset. It's about capturing that feeling, the mood, the essence of that, fleeting moment in time.
And Dixon does that masterfully. He invites us into his world to experience that warmth, that peacefulness of the landscape, the energy of the colors.
It's funny. We can learn so much just from watching an artist work. It's not even about the skills. It's about the mindset, the approach, being open to the unknown.
Absolutely. And that's something we can all take with us, whether we paint, write, or just, trying to figure out life. One thing that really strikes me is how Dixon embraces imperfection, He doesn't shy away from mistakes. He sees them as opportunities.
Yeah, totally. He even says something like, mistakes are not forever.
Right.
Encouraging people to just, wipe off the paint and start over if they're not happy. It's refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, so often we get caught up in this idea of perfection, especially in art, But Dixon, he reminds us it's okay to experiment. It's okay to, make mistakes and learn from them. That's often where the magic happens, right?
He seems to genuinely find joy in the process, even when things don't go to plan. There's a playfulness about it that's inspiring.
Yeah. He even talks about, the wonderful side of having to make it up as you go along. Those unexpected challenges can lead to really cool things. He's like, don't be afraid to get messy, explore, see where the paint takes you.
And you see that in the painting too, right? There's that looseness, that expressiveness that wouldn't be there if he was trying to control every brushstroke.
Huh.
It feels real,
Yeah.
genuine.
It does. It does. And it brings us back to that idea of mood. Remember how we talked about the velvety quality of the sky?
Yeah.
That's not just about color. It's also about texture.
Right. The way he layers the paint,
Yeah.
uses the scumbling and glazing, creates this richness you can almost feel.
It's like he's inviting you to touch the sunset, experience it with all your senses. And he uses texture in the foreground too, right? Creating that depth and detail in the grasses.
Yeah, he talks about using a really rough brush and stippling
Yeah.
to get the effect of, he says, lots of little things going on in the grass.
Yeah.
So it's like he's bringing the landscape to life, blade by blade.
And even though he's using all these different techniques, scumbling, glazing, dry brushing, his fingers even, there's a cohesiveness to the painting.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel disjointed or chaotic.
Right. It's like every brushstroke is considered, even the ones that seem spontaneous. It shows his mastery,
Absolutely. He's not just randomly slapping paint on. He's thinking about how each element relates to the whole, how each color, each texture contributes to the mood, the atmosphere.
And that's where his understanding of light comes in, right?
Yeah.
He uses color temperature to create that sense of distance, using cooler tones for stuff that's farther away and warmer tones for stuff that's closer.
That's called atmospheric perspective. And, it's a classic technique. Artists have been using it for centuries to create that depth and realism. You know how mountains in the distance look kind of bluish or purplish?
Right.
And objects in the foreground are more vibrant?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that. And he also uses light to highlight certain areas and cast shadows, adds another layer of depth and drama.
Yeah.
Light can be really powerful, for storytelling in art.
Right.
By placing the highlights and shadows, he's guiding our eyes through the painting, creating movement. intrigue.
Oh, I loved when he was describing using the palette knife
Yeah.
to create those shimmering reflections in the water.
Yeah, he talks about using a broken knife to get that nice little broken effect, capturing that fragmented look of reflections. It's so simple, but so effective.
Yeah, it is. It speaks to his resourcefulness, like he's willing to experiment with anything. He even mentions how he doesn't like to waste paint and uses older paints as long as they're still good.
There's a respect for his materials, for the craft. I find that admirable. And that resourcefulness, it's in his creative process too, right? He's not afraid to break the rules, try new things, find his own way.
It's really inspiring to see someone who's so passionate and finds joy in the process, not just the finished product, right?
It's contagious. His enthusiasm makes you want to pick up a brush and try it yourself. You know, see what you can create.
Totally. He makes it seem so approachable,
Yeah.
even for someone who's never painted before.
He demystifies it, shows us that art isn't some exclusive club, it's
Yeah.
open to anyone who wants to learn, experiment, express themselves.
He encourages us to, enjoy it, embrace the mistakes, not take ourselves too seriously. And that's a lesson that goes way beyond art.
It's a philosophy.
Embracing imperfection, learning from mistakes, finding the joy in the journey. He talks about how painting teaches us that mistakes are not forever, which is a really powerful message,
It is.
especially these days. We're constantly bombarded with images of perfection.
Right. It's a reminder that we can always start over, that we can always learn and grow, and there's beauty in the imperfections, the detours.
Dixon seems to have a really balanced approach,
Yeah.
recognizing the importance of discipline, but also intuition.
It's a tricky balance. Too much discipline can stifle creativity, but too much intuition can lead to chaos, right? Dixon seems to have found the sweet spot.
It's cool to hear him talk about how he uses color to evoke specific moods. He's very deliberate with his choices.
Remember how he talks about wanting to create a nice warm day,
Yeah.
very reflective waters. He uses those warm tones, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, to convey that warmth and tranquility. And then the cooler tones, the blues, purples, create that sense of depth and distance.
And he's not afraid to use bold colors either, like that red for the reflection.
It's daring.
Yeah.
But it works because he balances it with the other colors and textures.
Yeah.
It just adds this prop of energy. What did you think about his comment that, colors can be strange to people?
Oh, yeah, what's that about?
I think it's a reminder that color perception is subjective.
Yeah.
What one person sees as red, another person might see a little differently.
Wow.
And how colors interact can create unexpected results. It's all part of the mystery of art.
Yeah. He talks about using blue next to orange so they both look more vibrant. It's like they're having a conversation, right?
Exactly. It's called simultaneous contrast.
Hmm.
It's this principle of color theory that artists use to make things interesting, create depth.
Okay.
Yeah. He also mentions not making the sky too gray, using really saturated colors
Right.
to keep that vibrancy.
So it's about capturing that intensity that you get from a sunset. If you grayed it out, you'd lose that.
You lose it totally.
It's amazing how much thought goes into something that seems so simple on the surface.
That's the beauty of art, right?
Right.
Layers of meaning and intention. The more you look, the more you find.
This has been a really cool deep dive.
Yeah.
I have a whole new appreciation for sunset painting and for the creative process in general.
It's not just about painting a pretty picture. It's about understanding these principles of color, composition, light, and I think most importantly, the joy of experimentation.
And how he encourages us to enjoy the ride, the unexpected detours, the little moments of serendipity, that can lead to something beautiful.
Yeah. It's a reminder that creativity isn't about the end result. It's about the journey, the experimentation, the discoveries you make along the way.
It's about finding the joy in creating, regardless of the outcome.
Exactly. Letting go of the fear of messing up, embracing your own vision, having the courage to express yourself.
We've covered so much, it's crazy. It's like we've been right there with Dixon, watching the sunset come to life.
And, it's interesting. He takes this classic subject, the sunset, and makes it so personal. Like, it's not just any sunset, it's his.
Yeah. It feels authentic.
Yeah.
Even when he's talking about the hard parts, you can tell he loves it. It's kind of contagious.
Definitely. And that's why it's so engaging to watch. He's not trying to be someone he's not, just being himself, sharing his love for painting.
And he gives all these great tips,
Mm,
like using the cotton swab for the branches.
yeah, it's like he's saying, here are the tools, go make something awesome.
Exactly. Makes it seem like anyone can do it.
He demystifies it,
Uh-huh.
shows us that art isn't just for the talented few, it's for anyone who wants to learn,
Yeah.
experiment,
Yeah.
express
He
themselves.
says, like, enjoy the process. Don't be afraid to mess up. Don't take yourself too seriously. That goes beyond art.
Totally. It's a life philosophy.
Embrace the imperfection. Learn from your mistakes. Find the joy in the journey. He even says, mistakes are not forever.
Mm-hmm.
That's powerful, I think.
Yeah, it is. Like, we can always start over, always learn. There's beauty in those imperfections, the detours.
So, the biggest takeaway from Dixon and this deep dive,
Mm.
what would you say?
I think it's remembering that creativity isn't about being perfect. It's about the journey, the
Yeah.
experimenting, the surprises along the way.
It's about finding that joy in creating, whatever the result.
Exactly. Let go of that fear of messing up, embrace your own vision, and just express yourself.
So next time you see a sunset, don't just look at it. Think about it. The colors, the light and shadow, the texture.
Yeah, and maybe you'll even want to paint it, Your own version, your own way of capturing that moment.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into sunset painting with Alan Dixon. Hope you got some cool insights, maybe even some inspiration. Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating.